Chapter 301. Everly lost her smile the moment Olivia's name was brought up. Your imagination sure is wild, Mr. Miller. Why not become a scriptwriter? Ethan said, I heard that you ate 2 plates of lasagna and a regular pizza for dinner last night. Can't I have a feast to get the energy I need to work overtime? Before this, you were living like a lifeless zombie. You couldn't even finish half of your meals. Oh, you bought a new dress yesterday, too. Ethan prompted, tell me. Where did you meet Liv? He was not testing Everly. His tone expressed certainty. She slammed the table and rose from her seat in a fit of fury. Are you crazy? Why do you take note of what I eat every day so clearly? Are you going to take note of when my period is or when I have constipation too? He sighed, and she was taken aback by that. She thought, this man actually sighed. Everly, you know everything that happened between Liv and me. I didn't wish for her to be kidnapped. I've been searching for her these days. Please tell me if you know anything. The arrogant man was begging her. The urge to check if there were pigs flying was raging in her. Ethan continued, although Liv and I are separated, the fact that I love her doesn't change. I wanna protect her. There's someone else looking for her too. She's in danger alone out there. You mean the one who kidnapped her? Asked Everly. Yes. They're a troublesome international organization. They don't bat an eye whenever it comes to killing people. If Liv ends up in their hands, she regained her composure and gave it a thought for a while. I didn't meet her in person, but I know she came to see me. Why are you certain that she has come to see you? You didn't meet her in person. She took a crumpled paper from her purse and unfolded it. I bet you know whose handwriting this is. The words read, take care. It pained him to read that message. As he had expected, Olivia was going to leave this place. She specifically came to Everly to bid farewell. Everly calmed her trembling legs when she noticed his reddened eyes, not wanting to provoke him. If she comes to you again, the first thing you do is to contact me. He left a business card and left right away. He headed out of the restaurant, gazing at the gloomy sky. Aldenvine was neither a big nor a small city. However, he couldn't find the person he had been missing all this time. Kelvin asked carefully, Mr. Miller, what should we do next? To the hospital. Jeff had disappeared. Thus, Chloe was the only family member Olivia had in this city. Words about Chloe's terminal illness had gotten out. If Olivia was intending to leave the city, she would surely pay Chloe a visit first. That was Ethan's only chance to find Olivia. Chloe became thinner within a short period. She was in bad shape. Every time she slept, she would dream about Olivia pouncing on her, trying to kill her. Her bad mental health eventually took a toll on her already sick body. When Ethan arrived in her room, she was crying. She wiped her tears upon his arrival. Trying to regain her composure, she forced a smile. Ethan, you're here. Ethan initially had a neutral impression of her. But after considering the fact that she was Olivia's biological mother, hatred grew in him the moment he looked at her face. He suppressed the hatred in him. Do you feel better? Chloe smiled bitterly. I don't think I'm going to get better. This is my karma for abandoning my child. A nurse pushed a cart in the room. Mrs. Carlton, it's time for your checkup. Okay, responded Chloe. When Ethan was about to leave the room, the nurse opened the medical toolbox and took a children's watch out. Who's pulling a prank? Chloe's expression changed as soon as she saw the watch. Liv. Chapter 302. Ethan, who was reaching for the door, looked back at Chloe immediately. Miss Parker, what did you say? She raised the teddy phone watch, crying. I gave this to Liv the night before your engagement. When she was little, I promised her that I would buy her the latest watch. But I left that same year. I gave her this to make up for it. She held the phone watch to her chest. Liv must have been here. She doesn't want this phone watch, and she doesn't want me either. It's my fault. It's all my fault. Ethan ran out of the room. The huge hospital was full of people, but there was no sign of the person he missed. Liv. He shouted Olivia's name, but no one answered. Brent approached him. Mr. Miller, I've looked into it. It's the hospital's janitor who left the watch. Someone paid her to do that. Mrs. Miller didn't come. His heart sank to the pit of his stomach. Olivia didn't even visit her seriously ill mother. It was obvious that she was going to cut ties with Chloe. If she could cut ties with her biological mother, what about Ethan? He felt his head spinning as if he was going to fall at any moment. Mr. Miller, are you all right? Brent held Ethan's arm. Ethan suppressed the sorrow inflating in him. Brent, Liv doesn't want me anymore. The sky began to drizzle. He pushed Brent away and marched forward aimlessly. The wind caressed his face, and raindrops pattered on him. After taking a few steps forward, he suddenly looked back. I have a guess. What is it? I should be able to find out if she buys a train or flight ticket. We've also put in place strict inspections at each entrance. She won't take those risks with her life. Mr. Miller, do you mean? Brent looked at Ethan. She's going to travel by water. It's easy to hide a person on a cargo ship. Ethan found hope. Brent frowned. Aldenvine Port is one of the top 3 ports in the whole world. There are a lot of cargo ships docking at the port. It won't be easy to search for her. Besides, there are many cargo ships from other countries docking at the port to unload the goods. Even if we manage to obtain a search warrant, it'll take up a lot of time to search each and every cargo ship. Ethan ordered, search for her. Print out the list of incoming and departing cargo ships scheduled for the next 7 days. I don't care if they're going to dock at the port for 1 minute. Just record them for me. Yes, sir. Now, he had found the direction of his search for Olivia. Balling his fists, he thought, Liv, I'm never going to let you go. At the same time, Colin had packed up all of their stuff. He handed Snowball to Olivia. Smiling faintly, he said, let's go, Olivia. She stared at the cherry blossom tree absent-mindedly. Don't we have 2 days left? Why are we leaving earlier than planned? For peace of mind, he gazed at her gently. What's wrong? Do you have some unfinished business? She shook her head. No, I've said goodbye to them. Let's go. Colin knew what she was thinking. After all, Olivia had lived in this city for years. They didn't know when they would return after leaving the city. Furthermore, she had yet to find out who the mastermind was. So, she couldn't get over it yet. Okay. Colin grabbed some of Snowball's toys and headed outside. Meanwhile, Olivia was standing by the road while staring in a direction. It was the Fordham residence, and she could see that huge plum tree. Do you want to say goodbye to it? He questioned. No, I don't want to cause any extra trouble. She withdrew her gaze. She bid farewell in her head before getting into the car. He slowly drove along the streets. Mixed feelings churned in her as she watched the scene, which she was used to seeing for many years. Noticing that she was in low spirits, he cooed, Olivia, give me a second. I'll go get something from Yearwood's restaurant. You still remember my favorite. I will never forget about your favorites. He got out of the car and scurried into the alley. Since he was rushing, he bumped into someone while holding the paper bags. His car keys fell onto the ground. The red ball, which was attached to the car keys, fell off and rolled until it bumped into a leather shoe. Chapter 303. Colin quickly crouched down to pick the ball up, but someone was 1 step ahead of him. The stranger picked it up and played with it. It's pretty. The stranger had a gentle voice. Colin sized the stranger up. The latter had beautiful eyes. Although he was wearing a custom black and white suit, the aura he gave off was different from Ethan's. Ethan appeared intimidating, while the stranger appeared gentle. The stranger's gaze alone was gentle enough to remind others of spring. He was one of Ethan's best friends, Brian Moore. He was known to be a herbal maniac. They were standing close so Colin could smell the herbal smell from Brian. Colin smiled warmly. It's handmade, so it's different from machine-made products. Thank you, sir. Brian handed the ball to Colin. I guess this must be important to you. You went for this ball instead of the car keys first. It is. An important friend of mine gave it to me. I'll be off first, sir. Colin picked the car keys up and turned sideways to make way for Brian. Brian didn't say anything further as he entered Yearwood's restaurant. After Colin left, Brian fished his phone out and made a call lazily. When the line went through, Ethan said grumpily, anything you need. Must I have a reason to call you? Have you found Liv? Mischievousness seeped into Brian's voice. If you wanna make fun of me, do it some other day. I don't have time. Ethan was going to end the call. Brian grinned. But I found her. Ethan's finger paused, and he raised his voice. What did you say? Where is she? I bumped into a young man. He has a little red ball attached to his car keys. It looks like the one you had that year. At that time, Ethan brought that little red ball along everywhere he went, trying to show it off. Where is she? Asked Ethan. She was here 3 minutes ago. She's gone now, answered Brian. Ethan was angry as he huffed. Brian more. Be serious. Geez, why the vile temper? Anger is not good for your health. I took a picture. You can look into it yourself. Ethan received a message of a young man's picture. Even though it was only a side profile, Ethan could recognize the face easily. It was none other than Colin. Ethan didn't suspect Colin at all. Olivia had been staying with Colin all this time. Look into Colin. I want to know everything that happened to him recently, Ethan said. Previously, he found out about Colin, who was merely Olivia's neighbor. Colin had been living abroad, so there was nothing out of the ordinary. After an investigation, Ethan found out that the Moriarty family had been running a maritime transport business. Kelvin rushed to Ethan. Mr. Miller, I found something. The Moriartys applied for a cargo ship for departure a week ago. When is it going to depart? Ethan asked. It was scheduled to be 2 days later, but they suddenly requested an early departure. The application is approved. It will depart tonight. The cargo ship should be at the port by now. Damn it. Bring the men with us. Get them. Ethan grabbed his suit jacket and ran out. He had underestimated Colin. He didn't expect Colin to take Olivia away. On the other hand, Olivia was enjoying the sea breeze. She watched the drizzle while feeling a weight sitting upon her chest. What's the matter, Olivia? Colin asked. Nothing. Just feeling kinda uneasy. It was the same feeling she always had before something bad happened. I don't think we will be able to leave the place smoothly. Colin smiled confidently. Don't worry about it, Olivia. I've got everything prepared. It's cold outside. Let's head inside. Chapter 304. Ethan finally arrived at the port right when the cargo ship was going to depart. Kelvin led a group of officers to the cargo ship. We received a report that there are prohibited goods on your ship. The officers need to inspect your goods. You can depart today. The businessman, who was standing in front of them, said, Sir, I've reported the list of goods to the officials according to the rules. I've been running this business for over 10 years. Why would I transport illegal goods? We will find out after we inspect them. Get out of the way. A group of people swarmed the ship. Ethan was standing in the middle of the crowd, watching them taking action as if he was a god. His gaze swept across the managers of the ship. There was no sign of Colin. Holding his head high, Ethan asked, Where's Colin Moriarty? Mr. Moriarty, why would someone as prestigious as him be with us to transport the goods? Stop joking, sir. Kelvin grabbed that person's collar aggressively. Stop wasting our time. I know that he's on the ship. Call him out. They had checked the surveillance footage. Colin's car arrived at the port 2 hours ago. Sir, we run business by the law. Why should we lie to you? The businessman answered. Not wanting to waste time with the lying businessman, Ethan entered the cabin. Sir, we don't put the goods here. This is where we stay. I advise you not to go in there. It's a mess, the businessman said. Kelvin kicked the man away. Out of the way, Ethan strode into the cabin and kicked the doors open one by one. He thought, very well, Olivia Fordham. You keep testing my patience. You promised not to leave me, but you broke your promise. How dare you run away with another man? All he could think of was how he would punish Olivia after finding her. The more rooms he checked, the deeper he frowned. The crew accommodation was a mess. Most of the rooms reeked of smelly socks. He reached the last room in the cabin. He kicked the door open only to find a fat woman in it. She screamed in surprise. Mr. Miller, it's easy for them to get caught here. They won't choose to stay here. It could be one of the rooms downstairs. Kelvin tried to calm Ethan down. Noticing that something was off, Ethan looked at the open doors in the hallway. Everything seemed to be going smoothly for them. He put himself in Colin and Olivia's shoes. If he was them, would he board this ship, which stood out so much? Ethan soon comprehended the situation. Although Colin was young, he was a calculating man and might have devised a comprehensive plan. He must have guessed that Ethan would find out their plan to travel by water and search all the ships. Thus, Colin had specifically arranged a departure for this ship to draw Ethan's attention. Perhaps Colin and Olivia were already out in the sea by another ship. Darn it, Ethan huffed. Kelvin, who had yet to understand the situation, looked at Ethan dubiously. Mr. Miller, what's wrong? Olivia's not here. This cargo ship was huge, filled with big cargo. If they were going to search every nook and cranny of it for Olivia, it would surely take up a lot of time. After all the time spent on that search, Colin and Olivia might have been long gone. We're at the right place. This is the Moriarty's ship, said Kelvin. He has made a lot of preparations for many possibilities. He's also prepared for an inspection. This ship is a bait. Kelvin didn't believe that. Brent walked up to them with solemnity. Mr. Miller, there is a lot of cargo on the ship. We've brought a lot of men along, but it'll be midnight before we check all of them. It was as Ethan had expected. His expression darkened. No need for that. They're gone. They're gone. Ethan walked out of the cabin and ordered, "Get a helicopter ready. Tell them to stop all the cargo ships from leaving the border. Just say that a group of drug dealers are shipping drugs illegally." Chapter 305. The night darkened, and the rain poured heavier. The majestic waves were pounding against the ship. Olivia was sitting in the warm cabin, feeling the ship rocking back and forth. She didn't like that feeling because it made her uneasy. She needed to admit that Colin was a meticulous man. Someone had decorated her room at his request beforehand. The interior was almost the same as her previous room. Snowball was sleeping in its cat bed. Olivia lit a scented candle with a calming effect and played soothing music. There were tortilla chips, fries, dried fruits, and a bottle of orange juice placed on the table. They were bought from Yearwood's restaurant. She didn't have an appetite, so she read a book. But she lost her focus after barely reading 2 lines of the story. Like a cat on hot bricks, she walked back and forth in the room. At that moment, the ship stopped, increasing her uneasiness. She set the book down, wanting to head outside to ask what was going on. Olivia bumped into Colin at the door. He smiled faintly. Olivia. Colin, what's going on? It's nothing, Olivia, you're just too nervous. Noticing that she was overwhelmed by distress, he comforted her. If you can't stop thinking about it, go take a bath. I prepared some soothing essential oil. You should give it a try. Don't worry about it. The Maritime Police are here for inspection. They're usually here to check if there are any prohibited goods or drugs. We're good to go after we give them cooperation. He caressed her head softly. We're already out at sea. Ethan can never find you. He was so gentle that he seemed like a reliable elder brother rather than someone younger than her. Only then did Olivia recall the fact that he was younger than her by a year. He was more mature than his age. Colin, you're just a student. Why aren't you afraid? Her hunch was telling her that he had been through many hardships, hence his calm demeanor. He said honestly, I was sent abroad when I was young. Of course, I've suffered a lot. Plus, I knew my circumstances very well. I couldn't depend on anyone. Since being in a foreign land was more dangerous than being in the country, I befriended all sorts of people. That was why I was able to hire mercenaries. I'm sorry to hear that. Olivia looked at him seriously. Colin responded, it's nothing. At least my father still supported me financially. So, it wasn't that bad. Alright, enough with the past stories. Olivia, have a seat and eat something. You can take a bath and get some sleep. We'll arrive in the high seas tomorrow. Okay. He glanced at the message he received. As he had expected, Ethan had come. Colin had guessed that Brian wasn't a mere stranger. The latter could recognize Olivia's handiwork based on the little red ball. Fortunately, Colin has made a backup plan for that. He thought, search for Olivia all you want, Ethan Miller. Let's see if you can find her by the time the sun rises. Colin withdrew his gaze from Olivia and closed the door lightly for her. Right then, the warmth in his eyes gave way to a cloud of obsession. He thought, Olivia, I've finally found you. Even if the Grim Reaper is my enemy, I will never let him take you away from me. The number of ships forced to stop was increasing. The area was full of ships. Everyone began guessing if something big was happening. Perhaps the mothership of the neighboring country has sunk. Is there a war happening? Everyone had their own guesses. Some of them scanned the area at the deck while some of them were quietly waiting for the show to unfold. The number of maritime police was increasing, and Colin grew uneasy. Ethan was indeed the person at the top of the pyramid in the business world. Thus, it was normal for him to use such tricks when it came to business. The question was he that influential enough to have the maritime police serve him as well? To Colin, it seemed like the maritime police were carrying out their responsibilities as usual. However, Olivia didn't think the same. When she saw those numbered maritime boats, she recalled how that island was surrounded on both land and sea. Had Ethan not had the authority to dispatch the maritime police, the battleship wouldn't have shown up back then. One of the maritime boats was moving closer toward them. Olivia's complexion was looking bad. Chapter 306. A pale Olivia rested herself against the doorframe. Her whole body was shaking in fear. Memories of what happened on that island popped into her head. Ethan intruded on the place while carrying Connor in his arms. He threatened to kill everyone on the island only to convince her to go back with him. That day, she pleaded for their lives by promising that she would not leave him forever. Yet, she broke her promise. Ethan's face crossed her mind, saying, I told you you can't run away from me. Colin noticed her standing by the doorframe. Her hair was a mess because of the wind. He ran up to her. Olivia, you look awful. Is your stomach hurting? She finally pulled her senses back. The breeze sent chills down her skin. Trembling, she said, Colin, I regret it now. Olivia, what are you talking about? Freedom is one step ahead of us. Just hold on. We will win soon. She shook her head. No, it doesn't work that way. Ethan will never let me go. Send me back. I promised him that I would never leave Aldenvine. If he catches me, you'll be in trouble. Patiently, he said, Olivia, as I said, it's just the maritime police doing their job. Don't overthink it. Think about Mr. Fordham. You'll be able to meet with him soon. I told them to clean up the place on the island. It's very pretty over there. There are a lot of paper flowers of different colors. They're gorgeous. And the coconut trees line up across the road. You can pluck coconuts and have a cooling coconut drink whenever you like. I drank it before. It's sweet and fresh. The water is crystal clear, too. You can see the fish swimming. Don't you like snorkeling? We can go snorkeling together to see the beautiful coral reefs and butterfly fish. All you and Mr. Fordham have to do is to focus on your recovery. You can sleep and wake up at a Colin was painting Olivia's dream life. Anticipation flashed in her eyes. Can we really do that? Of course, Olivia, I will never lie to you. All right, it's windy out here. Let's head inside. She did as he said. She gradually calmed herself under his comforting words. You want. She smiled self-mockingly, thinking, Ethan is not a god. It's not like he has superpowers that allow him to see the whole world. How could he possibly know where I am? Then, 2 maritime officers boarded the ship. They showed their police badges before stating that they were tracking down a group of drug dealers. They requested everyone's cooperation to inspect the ship. The captain smiled gently. Please, have it your way. We're civilized people. We should give our full cooperation to the police. Thank you. The female officer looked at the male officer before they headed for the cabin. When he reached the door, the captain explained, that'll be troublesome. My family is resting inside. Sorry, we're doing our job. Please be cooperative. The 2 officers entered the cabin. Olivia was lying in bed, covering her face with a blanket. The female officer walked to the bed and reminded Olivia expressionlessly, Miss, please be cooperative and pull your blanket down. Chapter 307. Olivia was worried, so she put on makeup in a hurry. She made her skin tanner and drew a few freckles over her cheeks. Someone who was close to her might not be able to recognize her. Slowly, she pulled her blanket down to reveal her face. Ma'am, is something wrong? I'm feeling seasick, sorry. We're trying to catch a group of drug dealers. Please be cooperative. It will be a simple interrogation. The female officer took her book out and asked, "What's your name? What do you work as? Where are you going? How many people are there on board?" Olivia managed to answer those questions calmly. When the female officer was going to leave the cabin, she suddenly thought of something and took a pack of medicine out of her pocket. "I happen to bring along some medicine for seasickness. It's effective. Thank you." Olivia reached out for it. The female officer looked at Olivia's fair arm, alarming Olivia. There was a huge difference in skin color between her face and arm. Fortunately, the female officer didn't say anything. She shoved her book into her bag and stood up. "Get well soon." When the female officer left, Olivia's back was already drenched in sweat. The officers alighted from the ship. Olivia and Colin, who had put on makeup, smiled at each other. He said, "We're fine now. It'll take a little longer before we can continue our journey." Okay. The night was getting darker, and the rain didn't seem to be ceasing soon. Raindrops pattered against the window, drawing lines over lines. After taking a shower, Olivia wore a white nightgown and rested against the headboard. Snowball was sleeping in her arms. Only then could she read the book. She almost finished half of the story when she realized that the ship hadn't started the journey. She observed outside through the window. There were rays of light on the black sea. Yawning, she felt sleepy. When she was going to close the book to get some sleep, the sound of a propeller whirring resounded. It was a helicopter. She could hear it so loudly that it woke her up. It was unsuitable to fly a helicopter in the heavy rain. Just who was flying a helicopter in such weather? Olivia wondered if it was the drug dealers. Her heart began racing again. As the whirring sound got louder, the book in her hands fell onto the ground. Snowball, who was disturbed by the noise, looked out of the window in displeasure. She was shell-shocked by the scene. Before she knew it, their ship was surrounded by a circle of maritime boats. The officers were directing their lamps at their ship. A sense of foreboding dawned upon her. She ran out of the cabin with hasty steps. Colin was on the deck before her. It was as though they were surrounded by lions. Shined by multiple lamps, they had nowhere else to go. The majestic waves were roaring along with the strong wind. "Sorry, Olivia, it looks like we're tricked." Colin looked at her apologetically, but his voice was gentle. She stared at the battleship, which was advancing in their direction. The size of their ship and the battleship were that of a little and an adult turtle. Ethan was standing at the bow with his coat fluttering against the wind. Brent was holding an umbrella for him behind him. Like the Navy's general, he held the railings while looking at them from a higher altitude. He said something, and she knew what it was. "Liv, you can't run away from me." Chapter 308. Ethan's intimidating aura shrouded Olivia, and her whole body trembled. Colin was rather calm, holding an umbrella for themselves. His voice was gentle. "Olivia, it's cold out here. You should head inside. It won't make any difference from waiting inside." Since they were surrounded, she couldn't change their fate no matter what she did. In a daze, she watched the battleship approach their ship. Before the battleship completely stopped, Ethan had already boarded their ship. Olivia stood still as though someone had pressed the pause button on her. She didn't know how to react to the situation. Just like that, she watched Ethan coming up to her as the waves roared. As he drew their distance closer, she felt as if someone was sapping her soul out of her body. She didn't know how to face Ethan. She was clueless about how he would punish her and Colin, too. Ethan took his coat off and draped it over her shoulders. Only then did she pull her senses back. She was trembling unconsciously. "Why are you outside in such thin clothes?" He pulled her into his arms. She didn't break free from the familiar embrace like an obedient puppet. Ethan hugged her tightly and turned his head toward her ear. "Liv, I've been searching for you." His breath brushed her ear like a devil's whisper. Her throat became dry. "But you promised me that you wouldn't leave Aldenvine before. How should I punish you for breaking that promise?" He spoke softly. He noticed her body go stiff, and he caressed her cheek. Since he had been outside for a long time, his fingertips felt cold. Olivia slightly shuddered at Ethan's touch. He chuckled. "Silly you. I love you so much. How could I hurt you?" She raised her head, looking at him in disbelief. Based on her understanding of his character, she didn't believe that he would let the matter slide that easily. He held her chin. "Oh, silly Liv, I will never hurt you, but I can't say the same about others." Olivia's eyes widened. She grabbed his shirt and said hoarsely, "Don't hurt him. I begged him to take me away. Just come at me." As soon as she finished, she regretted saying that. The more she begged for others, the heavier Ethan's punishment would be. However, what else could she do besides beg him? The other ships were good to go. They left the area in order. Olivia was aware that they were trying to get rid of witnesses. Ethan merely stared at her in silence, driving her anxious. Kelvin and his men jumped onto the ship. They warmed their knuckles up while approaching Colin. "There you are, the brat that kidnapped Mrs. Miller. You're quite daring, aren't you?" Kelvin strode like a gangster, swaying his hands left and right. "We wasted so much time looking for you guys. You're dead meat." Olivia broke free from Ethan's arms and spread her arms before Colin. "Don't hurt him. It was my idea." Chapter 309. Brent was calmer compared to Kelvin. With a serious expression, Brent said, "Mrs. Miller, you should be aware of who you are. Mr. Miller hasn't slept for days just to find you. And yet, you're taking another man's side. Have you considered Mr. Miller's feelings? How would Olivia not know Ethan's feelings? But did she have any other choice? He is my neighbor. I begged him to take me away from here. It's all my fault. Don't hurt him," Olivia said. Looking at her anxious self, Colin smiled. "Olivia, stop. It's useless. I'm mentally prepared for this outcome." He took the risk because Olivia's life was at stake. He was one step away from winning the gamble, but luck was not on his side. He had not expected Ethan, the top businessman, to have the maritime police at his disposal. Ethan stared at Colin coldly. His tone was icy, too. "You're smart. Not as smart as you are, Mr. Miller. Even fate is on your side. I was one step away from winning the game, but I lost it in the end." Colin stood right there without fear. Like a lion king, he exuded pride and courage. Ethan acknowledged Colin's courage and cleverness, as well as strong ambition. "Being ambitious is a good thing. But she's not someone you can have," Ethan commented. "As society has always been, the stronger one becomes the king." "I know," Colin responded. The maritime boats were dispersed, leaving only those two ships at sea. The light on the deck was dim. The dim light was cast upon Ethan, but it didn't soften his demeanor. He looked at Olivia. "Come here." Olivia was distressed. She didn't want to anger him, but she didn't want to move away from Colin either. Kelvin coughed. "Mrs. Miller, you know that it's very scary when Mr. Miller gets angry." She slowly walked toward Ethan, gazing at him with pleading eyes. He pulled her into the cabin instead. Olivia was completely drenched due to the slanted raindrops. She seemed like a pitiful mermaid out of shore. She wanted to say something a few times, but Ethan didn't give her the chance to do so. He asked, "Which is your room?" She pointed at the room with an open door. Ethan pulled her into the room. Scanning the room, he snorted coldly. He's meticulous. He headed to the bathroom to fetch a towel. Gently, he dried her hair. Olivia was looking out of the window. Kelvin had tied Colin up. A scary thought came across her mind. What are you guys going to do to him?" Despite his gentle moves, Ethan spouted the cruelest words. "Simple. Tie him up and throw him into the sea. If he can survive it, I will let him go." It took 2 hours to travel to the port. But it would take a longer time because of the bad weather. Forget about freezing to death in the sea. Sharks might feed on him. When the anxious Olivia was going to say something, Ethan caressed her cheek. "Liv, do you know how I put up with the past few days? The sheer thought of him hiding you makes me mad. I wish I could tear him apart. Don't beg for him. I will cut him once for every word you say. You know that sharks love blood, don't you?" Chapter 310. At the same time, Kelvin had carried Colin to the side of the ship. He was going to throw Colin into the sea at any moment. They seemed used to such events. Kelvin and the men were smiling smugly. A horrified Olivia ran outside, ignoring Ethan's threat. With a cold expression, Brent advised, "Mrs. Miller. It's raining heavily. You should get inside. If you fall sick, you and Mr. Miller will be the ones suffering. Mr. Miller jumped through hoops to look for you. It wasn't easy for him. If we had arrived later, Colin could have taken you away. He deserves this. Olivia climbed the fence. Brent had a bad feeling about this. He asked someone to stop her, but it was too late. The determined woman was quick-witted. Ethan came out of the cabin. He looked at her sternly. Olivia Fordham, get back down here. Olivia, don't do anything stupid. Colin shouted. She stood at the edge of the ship. Behind her were the roaring waves that could engulf her like a beast at any moment. Her expression was sorrowful. No one knew if it was the rain or her tears that caused her cheeks to become wet. She shouted at Ethan, "You're not a god. Who are you to decide someone's death? Yes, I did promise you that I wouldn't leave Aldenvine. I'm the person who broke the promise. If you wanna blame anyone, blame me instead. Who gives you the right to vent it on someone else?" Ethan was aware that she wasn't joking around. She could jump into the sea. She was mentally ill after suffering so many huge blows for the past 2 years. In other words, her walls of sanity had crumbled. Ethan couldn't take the risk of provoking Olivia. "I'm not venting on him. Get down here first. We can talk." She smiled faintly. "Ethan Miller, I do wanna talk to you, but will it work? You're used to making your own decisions. You won't listen to others. Why are you so selfish? You're engaged with Marina. You've started a new life, but why can't you let me go?" "Liv, it's because I love you." "Love," she chuckled. "When I was kidnapped and almost got killed, where were you? They said the past few days have been rough for you. But have you ever thought about what I've been through for the past 2 years? It was hell. I lost my dignity, and everyone kept tampering with my pride. And someone's always setting me up, trying to send me to the deeper depths of hell." The wind blew her hair into a mess. Her frail body seemed so helpless in the night sky. She yelled from the top of her lungs. "Is this what you call love? You confined me to 4 walls, and there's no way out. You pushed me into the darkness with your bare hands. I don't need your love. I just need a ray of light, please. Someone's willing to break the cage and give me the light I need." He encouraged me to live on to see the bigger world. He told me that the waters are blue and clear enough to see the swimming fish. Tears ran down her cheeks, smearing bitterness in her mouth. Olivia swayed her hand in midair. "I wish I could see it myself. Those coral reefs and jellyfish. But I can't see it anymore. I know that an endless confinement is waiting ahead of me." She noticed the slight nuance in his expression and smiled. "See, I know you very well. You wanna lock me up so that no one can come close to me.